Hi everyone, this is Jennifer Johnson from BlueCross BlueShield of Western New York. Thanks for joining me today as we discuss probiotics and prebiotics. Most of you have probably heard the terms probiotics and prebiotics, but anything involving nutrition or supplements always causes a lot of confusion. You can see on the slide here just some of the different words that we hear about when we're reading or talking about probiotics and prebiotics. I'm sure you know what some of these words are, but some of them you've probably never heard of before. Supplements in particular are really big business in the United States, with Americans spending over $35 billion per year on supplements, many of which don't even have any benefit. Prebiotics and probiotics have been shown to have some benefit, but there's still a lot of confusion about how to use them and when it's appropriate to use them. My goal for today is to help you sort through some of that confusion. So we'll start out with some definitions of some of those words that you saw on the previous slide and go through some details. We'll talk about nutrition-based sources of probiotics and prebiotics. Then we'll talk about supplements and try to sift through some of the confusion surrounding those. We'll talk about whether or not supplements are actually needed, and we'll talk about how to choose a good one if you do decide to take a supplement. Then at the end, we'll wrap things up with some concerns about pre and probiotics, things to keep in mind, and then we'll talk about some tips for helping us all to stay healthy. Let's start out with the definition of the word microbiome. A microbiome is the collective bacteria that live in a particular habitat. So every habitat has its own resident bacteria. The human microbiome, which is what we're discussing today, resides mostly in our gut. Now, we do have bacteria that lives in and on other parts of our bodies as well. Our skin, our mouths, our nose, our eyes, any part of the body that is open to the air at some point or in some capacity will contain some microbes. The human microbiome outnumbers human cells by about 10 to 1. So we're actually made up more of bacteria than we are of human cells. The human microbiome makes up about 5 pounds of human body weight. Now that number fluctuates a little bit depending on what research you read. 5 pounds is considered to be an average, but I've seen anywhere from 3 pounds to 8 pounds. It really depends on the size of the human that we're talking about. And the human microbiome contains both beneficial bacteria and harmful bacteria. Normally, we harbor enough beneficial bacteria to help keep that harmful bacteria in check and prevent us from getting sick. The health of the human microbiome affects so many different bodily systems: our immune system, our gastrointestinal system, even our nutrition, our weight, maybe even our mental health and behavior are affected by the health of our microbiome. Let's go into a little bit more background on microbiome. So, where does our microbiome come from? How do we acquire all of this bacteria, good and bad? Well, for the most part, we acquire our microbiome mostly during the birth process. Birth is a pretty messy process, and during that process, babies pick up most of their bacteria from mom. So as babies pass through the birth canal, they pick up a lot of mom's vaginal bacteria. And that's what helps to begin culturing baby's gut. So babies, for the most part, babies in utero, their gut is considered to be sterile for the most part. So it's not until they come into the world, whatever method they come through, that they begin acquiring those microbes that will eventually culture their gut. We also tend to pick up a lot of bacteria from our environment, especially during childhood. So if you grew up on a farm, you grew up with a lot of animals or a lot of brothers and sisters, you pick up a lot of bacteria. And most of that bacteria is beneficial to us, and it helps to keep our microbiome healthy. Is everyone's microbiome the same? No, absolutely not. There's so many different factors that contribute to people's microbiomes. First of all, were you a vaginal birth or were you a cesarean birth? It makes a big difference. Babies born vaginally pick up a lot more of mom's beneficial bacteria as they pass through the birth canal. Babies who are born cesarean, that's a much more sterile process. So babies are less likely to pick up that good bacteria from mom and are more likely to pick up bacteria from mom's or dad's skin as well as their surroundings, which is a hospital, which really isn't such a great start. It also makes a difference whether babies are breastfed or formula fed. Again, breastfed babies pick up a lot of beneficial bacteria from mom as well as from mom's milk. Formula-fed babies don't get that same benefit. We know that babies born via cesarean and babies who were formula-fed as opposed to breastfed seem to have less diverse microbiomes. Another factor is where we live, our geography and the culture of the place where we live. That's going to include factors like our diet, our hygiene, and sanitation. Makes a really big difference in a person's microbiome. Whether you live in an urban or a rural environment, people who live in urban areas tend to be exposed to different types of microbes than people who live in rural areas. One isn't necessarily better than the other, but it's going to be different. People who live in rural environments or kids who grow up in rural environments are more likely to be exposed to more diverse bacteria than in an urban environment. And antibiotic use is a really big factor, especially here in the United States. The more courses of antibiotics that you have throughout your life, particularly during childhood and adolescence, makes a really big difference in a person's microbiome. Every time we utilize antibiotics, while they're beneficial, they do tend to wipe out a lot of a person's microbiome, and it really changes the strains and the varieties of bacteria that take up space in our bodies. Is there an ideal human microbiome? No. People can live in lots of different environments throughout the world, can be exposed to many different types of situations, different geography, different cultures. There's no one correct microbiome. But in general, the more diversity, the better. So in general, it's thought that the more diversity we have in our bacteria, in our microbiome, the healthier we are. And that's because a diverse ecosystem is more resilient. We're more likely to have the type of bacteria that we need when we need it, when we have more diversity in our microbiome. So how do we keep our microbiome healthy and diverse? Well, there's two ways. Encouraging the health of the microbes you already have, so keeping the bacteria that we already have in our systems healthy and happy, and adding new living microbes to your system, so expanding the diversity of our microbiome by adding new, different microbes into our bodies. We can do this through diet, supplements, or some combination of the two. And that's what we'll talk about next. Let's get into prebiotics and probiotics. Prebiotics are specialized plant fibers that stimulate the growth of healthy bacteria in the gut. So prebiotics are a way to keep our bacteria that we already have healthy and happy. Our bodies can't digest these fibers and starches when we consume them from plants. So they pass through our digestive system pretty much intact, and they become food for the microbes. Now, notice I've got food in quotes there. And that's because bacteria don't do anything as organized as eating, so they don't actually consume these plant fibers. Instead, they work to break down the fiber to some extent, and then the byproducts of their digestive process have beneficial effects on our health, including maintaining the health of the lining of our digestive tract. Different microbes like different kinds of fibers and starches, so it's important to get a variety of these fibers and starches in our diets. Feeding our bacteria what they like to eat is important because those bacteria provide us with any number of health benefits. We know that different microbes benefit us in many different ways. They help to produce various hormones and keep hormone levels in check. They help to manage our immune system, and they help to keep harmful bacteria from proliferating and making us sick. Probiotics, on the other hand, are beneficial bacteria that we consume directly. So probiotics are a way of introducing new, different, diverse bacteria into our bodies. Probiotics can be consumed through foods or through supplements, or both. Probiotics are the beneficial bacteria that we add to our system on purpose by consuming them. Consuming probiotics can allow us to add those new or different strains of microbes to our system, which can benefit us in many ways. Though many people who take probiotics or make a point of consuming probiotics do so to aid their digestive health, but there are many other benefits as well. Sources of prebiotics. Prebiotics are found wherever there's fiber, so in foods that come from plants, fruits, veggies, whole grains, nuts, and legumes, which are your beans, peas, and lentils. Most Americans don't get nearly enough fiber in their diet. The recommended daily allowance of fiber is between 25 and 35 grams of fiber per day, and that range depends on how many calories you need throughout the day. If you're a very active person who needs a lot of calories, you'll be closer to the 35 grams end of the spectrum. If you're a more sedentary person who needs fewer calories, closer to 25. But most Americans get between 12 and 15 grams of fiber a day. So across the board, we don't do very well on fiber because we don't consume nearly enough foods that come from plants. When we think about fiber at all, we think of it as a thing, a single nutrient that we find in foods. But fiber is actually hundreds or even thousands of different types of complex carbohydrates, and different microbes like different types of fibers. So eating a variety of plant foods every day is the best way to nourish our gut bacteria by giving them the types of fibers that they like to eat. Most of our gut bacteria lives in our large intestine. So bacteria ferments fiber when it reaches the large intestine, and that fermentation process nourishes the gut barrier, the lining of our gut, which is called the epithelium. That helps to prevent inflammation and keep the epithelium healthy. Processed foods, which is what the standard American diet largely consists of, are very low in fiber, which is part of the reason we get so little fiber in our diets. We rely very heavily on processed foods rather than whole foods, which contain much more fiber. Processed foods break down very easily, they're easily absorbed, and most of that digestive process takes place in the upper GI tract. While the bacteria, which live in the large intestine in the lower end of the GI tract, don't get any food. Processed foods break down really easily in the upper GI, leaving little to no food for the bacteria in the lower GI unless we're eating foods that are rich in fiber. Fiber passes through the upper GI pretty much intact, so by the time it gets to the lower GI, there's still plenty of food there for the gut bacteria to consume. The best way to get prebiotics into your diet is through food, so eating a variety of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and other fiber-rich foods are the best way to keep those gut bacteria happy and healthy. Sources of probiotics are a little bit different. Probiotics can be found in foods that are cultured or fermented. Nowadays, we use the words cultured and fermented pretty interchangeably, but in general, cultured foods have bacteria added to them to start the fermentation process, while fermented foods are left alone to be inoculated through bacteria in the air. Nowadays, even most fermented foods have a starter culture added to them, so there isn't really a huge difference. Cultured foods include foods like yogurt, kefir, sour cream, and some butters and cheeses. Yogurt is probably the most popular cultured food. Kefir is similar to yogurt, but it's thinner. It's something you would drink rather than something you'd eat with a spoon. Sour cream is pretty self-explanatory. And butter and cheeses, most butters and cheeses are not cultured, but some butter is still produced through culturing, and you'd see that on the label if you were purchasing cultured butter. Cheeses, raw milk cheeses, are still made with a culture, and you would find that on the label if you were looking for raw milk or cultured cheeses. Fermented foods include pickles, any kind of vegetable pickles or cucumber pickles, as well as shredded vegetable pickles, kimchi and sauerkraut, kombucha, and miso. Kimchi is an Asian variety of sauerkraut, different vegetables and different flavorings. Sauerkraut made from cabbage. Kombucha is a type of fermented tea that has other fruit flavors or spices added to it. And miso is a paste made from fermented soybeans. You can use it in salad dressings or soups. Some people even spread it on toast. Foods that are sources of probiotics will not be found on your grocery store shelves. So if you eat a lot of pickles, but the pickles that you eat come from the condiment aisle of the grocery store, you're not getting any probiotics that way. The processing that takes place to make food shelf stable, to allow it to sit on our grocery store shelves in cans or packages or jars, also kills off those beneficial bacteria in the name of food safety. So while the processing is killing off bad bacteria that can make us sick, it's also killing off good bacteria as well. You'll find foods that are sources of probiotics in the refrigerated section at the grocery store. So look around where you would look for butter, yogurt, and you'll see refrigerated pickles. You'll see refrigerated sauerkraut. You'll see kombucha. And those are the types of foods that are going to contain probiotics. When you're purchasing these foods and you want to make sure that they're sources of probiotics, look for the words probiotic on the label. Look for the word cultured, or look for the term live and active cultures. You may be used to seeing that on containers of yogurt, but you will also find it on many other foods in the grocery store as well. These foods are great sources of probiotics. They're a great way to add probiotics into your diet. These next two slides show you some of the commonly available brands of cultured and fermented foods that are available in grocery stores. Wegmans carries a wide variety of cultured and fermented products, and Tops carries some as well. Again, you will want to look in the refrigerator section for any of these cultured products in particular. Notice that under the heading of yogurt and kefir, there are no brands listed, and that's because pretty much every yogurt and kefir available contains live and active cultures. I haven't seen any of those products in years that don't contain live and active cultures. You can certainly double check the label to be sure. It should be on there, but pretty much yogurt and kefir across the board contains live and active cultures. You'll notice a lot of the brands on here are the Wegmans store brand or the Wegmans organic store brand. And Wegmans does carry a lot of their own versions of these products, which is great because buying those store brands helps to keep you within your grocery budget as well, while still getting those beneficial bacteria into your diet. This slide shows you some of the different fermented food brands that are available widely in grocery stores. You can also try making your own pickles or sauerkraut at home, but remember that making pickles at home and then putting them through a canner so that they can sit on your shelves through the winter isn't going to provide you with any probiotics. If you're making pickles or sauerkraut at home and you're looking for those beneficial bacteria, you have to do it the old-fashioned way, in a crock, in the basement, or another cool place, and then you'd want to store those finished pickles in the refrigerator rather than putting them through the canning process, which will kill off that beneficial bacteria. Let's move on to supplements. When we talk about any kind of supplements, it's important to remember that supplements are not regulated by the FDA. That means that we're really taking a leap of faith when we consume supplements because there's no regulatory body overseeing their safety and efficacy. Also, remember, whenever you begin taking a new supplement, and then again at least once a year, make sure you review that with your doctor. There are some supplements that can interfere with medications that you may be taking, so just review that regularly with your doctor to make sure that there aren't any issues. Let's start with prebiotic supplements. Prebiotic supplements and foods fortified with prebiotics contain fiber, which is great, but it isn't perfect. Supplements are usually a pretty clunky substitute for the types of vitamins and other nutrients that we get from foods. Many prebiotic supplements and foods fortified with prebiotics include only one type of fiber. So for example, if you take a fiber supplement, the kind that you stir into your water or orange juice or sometimes comes in a capsule form, most fiber supplements are made from a type of fiber called psyllium, which is a great type of fiber. It helps to keep us regular and provides other benefits as well. Psyllium is great, but it's only one variety of fiber. Many prebiotic supplements and fortified foods contain a type of fiber called inulin. Inulin is also a great type of fiber, but again, it's only one type. And as we've seen, eating a variety of different types of fibers is the best way to keep our gut bacteria happy. By giving them different kinds of fiber, eventually we'll find one that each of our different bacterias like to consume. So eating a variety of plant foods is always going to be your best first choice. Now for some people, trying to consume a lot of plant foods which contain a lot of fiber can be a little daunting. If you have a small appetite or you find it difficult to keep a supply of fresh plant foods like fruits and vegetables at home, it can be difficult to get all of that fiber from fresh plant foods. So my recommendation is always to try to get as much fiber in your diet from whole foods first. Then you can use a supplement or fortified foods to make up the difference of the fiber that you're missing. Probiotic supplements have been shown to be helpful, especially during times of illness and during antibiotic treatments. But it's important to remember that antibiotics and probiotics work in opposite ways. So if you want to take a probiotic during a course of antibiotic treatment, you can, and it's very helpful. It helps to reduce some of the side effects sometimes associated with antibiotic treatment, like diarrhea, for example. Probiotics are great for that. But you want to take those probiotics and the antibiotics at least a couple of hours apart. So take the probiotic a few hours before or a few hours after you take your antibiotic dose. Antibiotics will wipe out all bacteria, good and bad, so the bad bacteria that's making you sick, as well as any good bacteria that you're adding into your body in the form of probiotics. So give yourself a nice window of a couple of hours in between a probiotic dose and an antibiotic dose. You can also take probiotics following a course of antibiotics. So once you've finished the whole course of antibiotics, then you can take probiotics to help replace some of those microbes that you lost during that antibiotic treatment. In general, supplements are perfectly fine for most people. You do always want to check with your doctor first, but many researchers in the field of the human microbiome and probiotics feel that rather than taking a lot of supplements, adding fermented and cultured foods to your diet first is the way to go. So much as I recommended trying to get your prebiotics from whole foods first, then topping off with a supplement if you need it, most researchers feel the same way about probiotics. Try to add more fermented and cultured foods like yogurt, like kombucha, like miso to your diet first. And then if you feel like you can't quite get enough, then it's okay to take a probiotic on top of that, as long as it's okay with your doctor. If you do decide to take a probiotic supplement, here are some tips to help you choose a good one. Whether you're shopping in person or whether you're shopping online, there is some information that you want to find out before you make your choice. You might find this information on the label, but those labels can be pretty small for all of the information that needs to be included. So sometimes you might have to go out to the manufacturer's website to get all of the information that you need. You want to look for the genus, species, and strain of each of the microorganisms included in the supplement. So you can see the example that I have here. You're going to have the genus, which in this case is Lactobacillus, the species, which is Reuteri, and the strain, which is that long list of letters and numbers there. You want to see that for every single strain of microorganism that's included in that supplement. You also want to see the number of organisms in a dose and the frequency of dosing. So how frequently do you need to take it? How many times throughout the day do you need to take that supplement? You want to look for a supplement that has at least 7 different strains of microorganisms and at least 5 billion CFUs or cells. CFU stands for colony forming units, and it's just another way of explaining how many microorganisms are included in a particular dose of that supplement. Be sure to check the expiration date, which you should always do when you're purchasing any kind of supplement, and check the storage directions. Many types of probiotic supplements need to be refrigerated or kept cool, so you want to check on the label to see whether that's the case, and if it does need refrigeration, make sure you buy it from a supplier that keeps it refrigerated, including if you're purchasing it through mail order or through a website, make sure that it's being shipped to you in an insulated container. Something that you may see on some brands of probiotics that are advertised, manufacturers will mention that their capsules survive stomach acid. That's usually just a marketing ploy. Most of the common species of probiotics that we take in supplements, such as Lactobacillus, Bifidobacterium, and Streptococcus, survive passage through our stomach acid just fine. If you're looking for other species of probiotics, other than the ones I just listed, look for an enteric-coated capsule or other system to ensure that the probiotic you're buying will make it to your gut. Whenever you're purchasing any type of supplement, probiotic or otherwise, try to look for third-party certification on the label, or look up the supplement online to verify that what you're purchasing is what you think you're buying. Remember that supplements are not regulated by the FDA. However, many manufacturers choose to have their supplements certified by an outside agency to guarantee that what you think you're purchasing is what is actually in the bottle. There are several different third-party certification agencies. You may see USP, NSF, Consumer Labs, and LabDoor are all good third-party certification agencies. There are a few concerns to mention when it comes to prebiotics and probiotics. When you begin adding prebiotic and probiotic foods and supplements to your diet, make sure to go slowly. In the case of adding prebiotics, you're adding fiber. In the case of probiotics, those beneficial bacteria can lead to some GI issues. Both prebiotics and probiotics can lead to bloating, gas, diarrhea, especially when you add in a large quantity of them all at once. So increase their presence in your diet slowly, and make sure to add water to your diet as well, particularly in the case of prebiotics. When you're adding fiber, remember that fiber is like a sponge, and sponges absorb water. So you're going to need more water in your diet to help that fiber bulk up and pass through your body more comfortably. People who have compromised immune systems or who are receiving cancer treatment should get a doctor's okay first before adding probiotics to their diet. This is important because even though probiotics are beneficial bacteria, they're still bacteria. So you want to make sure that you're getting a doctor's okay before you add anything like that to your diet if you are immunocompromised or you're receiving any type of cancer treatment. And last but not least, if you have diabetes, make sure you talk with your doctor or a registered dietitian or certified diabetes educator before increasing your intake of fruits, vegetables, or whole grains. Fruits, veggies, and whole grains are all carbohydrates. So increasing your carbohydrate intake can affect your blood sugar. Fruits, veggies, and whole grains are all great foods with a lot of fiber that we can all benefit from, but people who have diabetes need to do that safely to make sure that it doesn't affect their blood sugar control. Here's a few more tips for helping to manage the health of your microbiome. Avoid antibiotics unless absolutely necessary. Antibiotics only work on bacterial infections. Antibiotics are completely useless against viruses. So taking antibiotics for a cold, for example, are not going to be helpful. Try to avoid pressing your doctor to prescribe antibiotics for you when you don't really need them. Also, if your doctor prescribes antibiotics, it's okay to question why your doctor thinks those will be helpful. Even doctors don't always properly prescribe antibiotics, so it's okay to push back and ask those questions. Try not to use antibacterial soaps and cleaning products, and let me clarify what I mean there. Antibacterial soaps are not necessary. Plain old regular soap and water is just fine for washing your hands. You're going to get the same result. Antibacterial soaps tend to overdo the cleanliness. Regular soap and water works just fine. You don't need special antibacterial soaps to get your hands super clean. In the case of cleaning products, I know that right now we're all being very careful about sanitizing and really trying to keep things very clean. It's okay to use Clorox wipes if you're bringing in groceries or you're bringing in things from outside your house. You want to wipe down your doorknobs, your light switches every so often. With everything that's going on right now, that's completely fine. What I'm cautioning against is the overuse of those antibacterial cleaning products. You don't need Clorox wipes every single time you do your dishes and wipe down your kitchen counters. Most of the time, again, dish soap and warm water will be perfectly fine. However, it is understandable if you're being extra cautious right now with those antibacterial or bleach-based cleaning products. Get outside. When we're outside, we're exposed to so many more beneficial bacteria than we are inside our own homes. So get outside, garden, dig in the dirt, pull the weeds, go for a hike, pet the dogs, whatever it is that you do when you're outdoors interacting with nature is really highly beneficial for our microbiome. Whenever possible, avoid processed foods. Now, this is a tip that's true not just for the health of our microbiome, but for our health in general. Processed foods are generally stripped of all beneficial nutrients. They contain very little fiber, very few vitamins and minerals. They just aren't a good choice for us. So, to the best of your ability, eating a diet that's rich in fresh, whole foods is always going to be your best choice, not just for your microbiome, but for your health overall. And last but certainly not least, try to choose antibiotic-free meat, dairy, and eggs. Many of the animals that we consume as food in one form or another, whether that's through their meat or their eggs or their milk, many of those animals are raised being given very high doses of antibiotics throughout their lives to keep them from getting sick. What we don't know is how those antibiotics may affect us and our microbiome. So until we know more, it's prudent to try to avoid those antibiotics in animal products as much as we can. Antibiotic-free meat, dairy, and eggs may be a little bit more expensive in the grocery store, but it's also going to give us greater peace of mind. Lastly, I have a few other resources for you today. If you're interested in this topic and want to do more reading on it, there's a few really excellent books that talk about the human microbiome. The first is a book called Cooked by Michael Pollan. Michael Pollan is a journalist and a professor at Berkeley, and his wonderful book called Cooked has a section called Earth that goes into a lot of detail about bacteria and the microbiome and how we can help to keep it healthy. If you don't want to buy the whole book just to read one section, I'm sure you can find it in the library, but it's a fantastic book. There's also a book called Rewild by Jeff D. Leach that talks about how we have gotten away from our healthy microbiomes and how we can begin to make them healthier and repopulate with those healthy bacteria. There's a website for an organization called the American Gut Project. You can find it at humanfoodproject.com/American Gut. And the American Gut Project is a crowd-funded endeavor that is attempting to document the microbiome and map the microbiome of Americans in particular to find out where we're deficient, how we can do better, and how we can attempt to get ourselves back to those healthy and beneficial microbiomes. So if you check out their website for a donation to their project, you can actually send them samples of your saliva or stool samples, and they will map out your microbiome so you can see what bacteria are prevalent in your gut and what isn't there, maybe more importantly. Even if it's not something you're interested in doing, their website is still a very interesting read. Next, there's a video that I would highly recommend, and it's a TED Talk, if you're familiar with TED Talks. If you go to the website TED.com and you search for a man named Rob Knight, you'll find a video given by Rob Knight that's entitled How Our Microbes Make Us Who We Are. It's about a 17 or 18 minute video, and it's absolutely fascinating. I would highly recommend checking that out. And then last but not least, you'll see here there's a web address for an article in the New York Times. I'm actually providing this article as a file for you today as well. So if you're able to access that, great. If not, you can go to this website and check it out. It's an article written by Michael Pollan, the author of Cooked. And it's quite a long read. It's about 10 pages long, but it's really interesting. It's about his experience with having his microbiome mapped and some of the researchers and scientists that he talked to along the way. So it's a very interesting article. So any of these resources will give you a lot of information and a lot more background if this is something that you're interested in learning more about. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me today. I hope you're able to access that file with the article, and I hope that I'll be able to see you all in person, perhaps this fall, for the fall semester of University Express. Thank you again, everybody. I hope everyone is staying well, and take care.